approfondie par nos leaders. Le deuxième champ d'action qui préoccupe notre commission concerne la stabilité politique et les crises sécuritaires, ainsi que les conflits sur le continent. Il y a eu régression, les progrès sont minimes. Les médiations et les bons offices tardent à donner les résultats escomptés. Le Conseil de paix et de sécurité est réactif. Le département de la Commission ayant la charge de ces questions fait œuvre utile et nos médiateurs s'activent. Cependant, et je le répète, nous n'avons pas beaucoup progressé. Sur les changements anticonstitutionnels du gouvernement, je salue le retour de la Guinée, Conakry et du Gabon au sein de l'Union africaine, après un processus de transition réussi avec l'accompagnement de la Commission. Malheureusement, Madagascar et la Guinée-Bissau ont connu cette année 2025 des changements inconstitutionnels de gouvernement. La Commission s'efforce d'accompagner ces deux pays dans leur processus de transition. L'autre question qui nous préoccupe beaucoup, c'est le terrorisme. Dans le Sahel et la Corne de l'Afrique, la menace terroriste ne recule pas. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le développement et l'intégration représentent un autre chantier, aussi vaste que les précédents. La ZLECAf et les agences spécialisées sont à l'avant-garde de nos actions multilatérales. Les progrès sont palpables. L'initiative du commerce guidé est là pour nous le rappeler. L'ODA-NEPAD, le CDC et l'AMA, et je ne pourrais les citer tous, des mécanismes actifs qui travaillent en harmonie avec les États membres. Plus que jamais, le continent a besoin de capitaliser sur ces instruments afin de booster la dynamique de développement et de l'intégration. Réfléchir à des sources de financement innovantes, associer le secteur privé africain. D'ailleurs, nous aurons un événement à ce sujet en marge de ce sommet. Associer le secteur privé africain à nos programmes, les associer pour qu'ils puissent contribuer au financement de ces programmes de développement, associer la société civile, associer également les fondations de philanthropie. Aucun acteur, si marginal soit-il, ne doit être ignoré. L'argent, comme on dit, est le nerf du développement et de la prospérité. Je crois que la mobilisation des ressources domestiques sur le continent, et d'ailleurs toutes les institutions financières africaines le disent, l'argent est sur le continent. Il faut pouvoir y accéder pour pouvoir financer nos programmes de développement. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'agenda du sommet, de ce 39e sommet, a déjà été circulé. Nous nous sommes efforcés de le compacter le plus possible. Nous connaissons tous l'inefficacité des sommets marathons. La clé de la réussite de nos réunions dépend énormément de notre capacité à nous concentrer sur les sujets stratégiques et sur les questions marquées par le sceau de la priorité absolue. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je conclurai donc mon intervention liminaire d'introduction à cette réunion du Conseil exécutif en remerciant sincèrement l'Angola, le président du Conseil exécutif et le ministre Tété, Antonio, qui a dirigé ce Conseil pendant 1 an, qui a fait œuvre utile, et je tiens, au nom de la Commission, à le remercier. Je souhaite à votre auguste Conseil un plein succès dans le cadre de vos délibérations. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Excellence. J'ai le plaisir d'inviter maintenant Son Excellence Gédéon Timotheos, ministre des Affaires étrangères de la République fédérale démocratique d'Éthiopie, à donner son discours. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Tete Antonio, Minister of External Relations of the Republic of Angola and Chairperson of the Executive Council, Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers, Your Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Salma Melika Hadid, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Mr. Clever Gatete, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor and pleasure that I welcome you all to the 48th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Allow me also to express profound appreciation to the Republic of Angola and our dear brother, His Excellency Tete Antonio, for the very successful leadership of our Council in this past year. My gratitude also goes to the new team at the AU Commission, led by His Excellency Mohamed Ali Yusuf and his deputy, my dear sister, Her Excellency Salma Malika Hadid, for their commitment and dedication in the service of our continent. As we gather here today, sitting under the umbrella of our union, which was established with the purpose of achieving political independence and economic integration, we are reminded of the importance of unity for our collective security, independence, and prosperity. This past year, we have witnessed mixed developments in our continent. It is encouraging to note that we stood together to promote a common position with regard to UN Security Council reform, climate justice, and the reform of the global financial architecture. A common position on these matters was on display, in particular, in the first G20 held on African soil in South Africa, Pretoria. Several elections have also been held throughout our continent. The Republic of Guinea and the Republic of Gabon have also rejoined our union through the restoration of constitutional order. More and more countries are also relying on the AU Commission for electoral support and observation missions. These are some of the positive developments we need to consolidate and build upon. On the other hand, our continent is still grappling with incidents of unconstitutional change of government, which are undermining the normative foundations of our union. The evolving geopolitical landscape in which multilateralism and global cooperation are being eroded is also adversely affecting peace and security in our continent. Fierce competition for technological supremacy, control of critical mineral resources, and major logistics routes are becoming a dominant feature of international relations. Trade and economic cooperation are becoming subordinated to political and security considerations. In this context, many big and middle powers are viewing Africa as a site for their competition and as an instrument of their ambitions. Unfortunately, a mentality of domination, extraction, and exploitation still colors the prism through which many external actors view our continent. African unity must be real, and African Union must be strong if we are to defend our continent from predatory moves that might come from all corners. What we need is not mere charity or goodwill of others, but true partnership, and that, more than anything, requires true strength which emanates from unity. Therefore, I hope that this session of the Executive Council will contribute to bolstering our unity and revitalizing our commitment to our shared objectives. Excellencies, this is also a moment to reflect on the economic and social developments of the past year. In 2025, Africa strengthened its regional integration through Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Area. The aspiration for a continental free trade area has now turned into a living reality, and its implementation is accelerating in multiple fronts. There have also been progresses in strengthening primary health care, improving our agricultural productivity, and tackling climate change. Our continent is making steady progress in the social and economic spheres, and the African Union is playing an important role in this journey. But the road ahead and the work that lies before us require greater unity and resolve. We are still very far from the Africa we want, and hence we need to redouble our efforts. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the coming years, Africa's common voice must uphold African ownership of African solutions by defending peace, constitutional order, and sovereignty through strong continental leadership. We must also continue with our demand for fair global partnership and financial reform, including debt relief and climate financing, grounded in equity and respect. No global platform can be considered credible or be effective without Africa having its rightful role in shaping and influencing international decisions. Finally, as Ethiopia prepares to host COP32, I want to take this opportunity to assure you that we view this as an opportunity for Africa to lead the global conversation on climate justice and sustainable development. As the theme of this year happens to be sustainable water availability and safe sanitation, it also offers us an opportunity to carefully consider how we can rejuvenate the ecology from which our water resources originate. Africa is blessed with majestic rivers like the Nile, Congo, Niger, and Zambezi, and great lakes like Victoria, Tanganyika, and Malawi. Our approach towards these resources should be guided by the principle of Ubuntu, taking into account the needs, situations, and aspirations of all concerned. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I wish to thank each member state for your continued trust and partnership. May the deliberations of this session strengthen our union and truly advance Africa's interest. I wish you all a productive and enjoyable stay. Amasagnaalo, I thank you, merci beaucoup, shukran, obrigado, gracias, asante sana.
Merci, Votre Excellence, et j'ai maintenant le plaisir d'inviter Son Excellence Claver Gatete, secrétaire général adjoint et secrétaire exécutif de la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique, à prononcer son discours. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Tete Antonio, Minister of External Relations of the Republic of Angola and Chairperson of the Executive Council, Your Excellency Muhammad Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Dr. Gideon Timotheos, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency Selma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address the 48th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council. On behalf of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, I thank the government and people of Ethiopia, our gracious host, and commend the African Union Commission for convening us at this critical moment for our continent. Indeed, we meet at a time of profound economic transition. As we speak, global growth is slowing, trade tensions are intensifying, and supply chains are being reorganized. Furthermore, capital has become more expensive, and development assistance that was once a predictable pillar of support is declining. This is exacerbated by a worsening security situation and persistent climate change. We are witnessing a transition to a world economy organized around industrial strategy, geopolitical competition, and control of key resources. In short, the rules of development are changing. For decades, developing countries relied on an external model: export raw materials, import manufactured goods, and finance development through concessional flows. But that model is no longer viable. The implication for Africa is clear. Our development can no longer depend primarily on external conditions. It must increasingly be organized around our own continental economic system. Across the continent, African governments are managing tighter fiscal space, higher borrowing costs, and limited credit ratings. It is not right that today only 3 African economies are investment rated, with 5 approaching investment grade status, while 19 countries have never been rated at all. This state of affairs significantly increases the risk premium African countries pay to finance development. But more than a fiscal challenge, it is also a structural one. When finance is expensive, infrastructure is delayed. And when infrastructure is delayed, production is constrained. And when production is constrained, industrialization stalls. Meanwhile, Africa possesses land, renewable energy potential, critical minerals, and a young labor force. But do we have the economic system that allows those assets to generate value? This is why the African Union's theme of the year, assuring sustainable water availability and 15 preventable deaths every hour in African region, according to World Health Organization. The economic implication is significant. Poor water and sanitation reduce labor productivity, increase health expenditures, and discourage investment. Factories require reliable water supply, agro-processing requires irrigation, and cities require sanitation systems to function productively. In fact, investment decisions, including the location of industries and industrial parks, depend on reliable basic services, including access to water. But without reliable water systems, industrial zones cannot operate competitively, logistics hubs cannot expand efficiently, and urban economies cannot grow sustainably. At the Economic Commission for Africa, we view development as an integrated economic system. Infrastructure, finance, trade, and industrial policy function together. And water sits alongside transport, energy, and digital connectivity as a foundational input into economic production. When production inputs are unreliable, economies cannot manufacture competitively. And when economies cannot manufacture competitively, they remain exporters of raw materials rather than producers of value. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in Africa, if Africa is to compete globally, we must move beyond exporting raw commodities. We must process our minerals, transform agriculture, and produce higher value goods. This is the logic of value addition and regional value chains. In this respect, Africa Continental Free Trade Area represents Africa's foremost development platform, enabling production at scale and competitive industries within our continental market. As global trade fragments, regional integration becomes vital. I'm confident that Africa will industrialize because our continental market allows production to be organized internally. But it will require a policy response, which must be deliberate, coordinated, and anchored in our economic priorities. Allow me, Excellencies, to outline 5 priority actions for our collective attention. First, Africa must mobilize and manage development finance more effectively. To this end, we should strengthen domestic resource mobilization, as mentioned by the chairperson, improve public financial management, and enhance credit credibility so that African countries can access capital markets on fairer terms and reduce the cost of infrastructure financing. It is not right that Africa's tax to GDP ratio remains at 16% compared to 34% in EU. Additionally, innovative instruments, including green bonds, blue bonds, and blended finance, should be used to fund productive infrastructure, including water systems that support economic activity. Second, we must invest in integrated productive infrastructure. Water systems should be planned alongside transport corridors, ports, energy networks, and digital infrastructure so that they support industrial parks, logistics hubs, and productive cities rather than operate as an isolated sectoral projects. Third, we must accelerate value addition through regional value chains under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. African resources must increasingly be processed within the continent in agro-processing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and green minerals. This will allow our trade to move from raw exports to industrial exports. Fourth, we must deepen continental market integration. This requires full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, including the removal of tariff and non-tariff barriers and the harmonization of standards. With efficient customs systems in place, African farms will be able to expand production across borders and anchor sustainable industrialization. Fifth, Africa must harness technology and data as economic infrastructure. Digital platforms, artificial intelligence, and data systems can improve tax administration, logistics management, trade, infrastructure maintenance, and industrial productivity. Investing in digital public infrastructure will strengthen state capacity and enable more competitive economies. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Africa possesses the assets, the resources, markets, and demographic momentum to achieve structural transformation. What we must now build is coordination. Finance that supports infrastructure, infrastructure that supports industry, and industry that supports trade. If we finance our infrastructure, integrate our markets, add value to our resources, and trade more with each other, Africa will not just participate in the global economy, it will help to shape it. And the Economic Commission for Africa is ever ready to support this agenda in close partnership with member states, the African Union, and the regional institutions. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Merci, Votre Excellence. Et maintenant, c'est avec un immense plaisir que j'invite Son Excellence Tete Antonio, ministre des Relations extérieures de la République d'Angola et président du Conseil exécutif de l'Union africaine, à prononcer son allocution. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Muito obrigado por me passar a palavra, Excelência Gédio Timoteus, Ministro de Negócios Estrangeiros da República Democrática Federal da Etiópia, Excelências, Senhores Ministros e membros do Conselho Executivo da União, Sua Excelência Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, nosso caro irmão, Presidente da Comissão da União Africana, Sua Excelência Clavé Gatete, Secretário Executivo da UNECA, nosso caro irmão, distinta Senhora Vice-Presidente da Comissão da União Africana, distintos comissários da Comissão da União Africana, distintos chefes e representantes dos órgãos da União Africana, distintos chefes executivos e representantes das comunidades econômicas regionais e mecanismos regionais, minhas senhoras, senhores e senhoras membros do Comitê de Representantes Permanentes da União Africana, caros convidados, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, todo o protocolo observado. Gostaria de saudar especialmente os colegas que se juntam a nós pela primeira vez e que participam pela primeira vez nesta sessão do Conselho de Ministros e, por que não, todos quantos pela primeira vez se fazem presente nesta nossa sede. É com elevada honra e profundo sentimento de responsabilidade de que reitero as boas-vindas a todos nesta sala de reuniões por ocasião da 48ª Sessão Ordinária do Conselho Executivo da União Africana. Saúdo todos os Estados-membros aqui representados, bem como os parceiros institucionais e convidados, agradecendo a vossa presença e o vosso contínuo compromisso com a nossa organização continental. Antes de prosseguirmos, permita-me, Excelências, expressar em nome do Conselho Executivo da União Africana e em meu nome pessoal as nossas mais sentidas condolências aos governos e aos povos do Reino de Marrocos e da República de Moçambique, bem como às famílias enlutadas na sequência das perdas de vidas humanas causadas pelas recentes e catastróficas inundações. Neste momento de profunda dor, reiteramos a nossa solidariedade fraterna e o nosso apoio, desejando força e coragem às populações afetadas. Que as almas das vítimas descansem em paz. Excelências, esta reunião estatutária reveste-se de um significado particular. É um momento crucial do nosso calendário institucional. A presente sessão marca igualmente o fim do mandato da República de Angola na presidência rotativa da União Africana. Trata-se, por isso, de uma ocasião de balanço, de responsabilidade partilhada e, sobretudo, de projeção do futuro da nossa União. Excelências, o Conselho Executivo ocupa um lugar estratégico na arquitetura institucional da União Africana. É neste órgão que se assegura a coerência das políticas continentais, se harmonizam as posições comuns e se preparam decisões estruturantes que orientam a ação da Conferência do Chefe de Estado e de Governo da União Africana. O seu papel é, por conseguinte, decisivo para a credibilidade e eficácia, bem como a relevância da União Africana no contexto africano e internacional. Essa constatação norteou a ação da presidência angolana à frente da nossa organização. É também a ocasião de agradecer-vos todos, Estados-membros, pelo apoio que brindaram à República de Angola durante esta presidência. Profunda gratidão ao nosso irmão, presidente da Comissão, a vice-presidente, aos comissários da Comissão da União Africana, que sem tréguas apoiaram a presidência da República de Angola. Ao longo do seu exercício na presidência do Conselho Executivo, a República de Angola pautou a sua atuação por uma abordagem pragmática, inclusiva e orientada para os resultados. No plano das sessões ordinárias, presidimos a 47ª sessão do Conselho Executivo da União Africana, cujos objetivos foram alcançados com sucesso graças ao apoio e empenho de todos os Estados-membros da nossa União. Estamos agora na 48ª sessão, com a determinação de concluir de forma responsável os dossiês pendentes e de lançar bases sólidas para as etapas subsequentes do nosso trabalho coletivo. No domínio das reformas estruturais da União Africana, registramos os avanços significativos. Destacamos de forma particular a conclusão do processo de escolha da liderança da nossa organização, o início da implementação do processo do SACA, bem como os esforços empreendidos para a revitalização dos métodos de trabalho dos órgãos da União, com vista a torná-los mais eficientes, previsíveis e alinhados com as ambições da Agenda 2063, conhecida por a África que queremos. Minhas senhoras, meus senhores, No quadro do multilateralismo, Angola promoveu uma diplomacia ativa e construtiva, contribuindo para a realização de importantes encontros ministeriais que criaram condições políticas para a realização da TICAD 9 em Yokohama, no Japão, bem como a 7ª Cimeira União Africana, União Europeia, acolhida em Luanda, República de Angola. Estes momentos reforçaram a voz da África nos fóruns globais e consolidaram parcerias estratégicas baseadas no respeito mútuo e em interesses comuns. No domínio da paz e segurança, a República de Angola deu uma contribuição consistente e contínua a todos os níveis, nomeadamente técnico, diplomático e político, durante o seu mandato de 2 anos no Conselho de Paz e Segurança da União Africana. Este empenho traduziu-se, entre outros esforços, no apoio da designação de Sua Excelência Evariste Ndayishimiye, Presidente da República do Burundi, como facilitador para a região do Sahel, e de Sua Excelência Faure Gnassingbé, Presidente do Conselho de Ministros da República Togolesa, como mediador da União Africana no conflito que opõe a República Democrática do Congo e a República do Ruanda. Angola apoia igualmente todas as iniciativas destinadas à promoção da paz, da estabilidade e da reconciliação no continente africano, nomeadamente na República Centro-Africana, na Somália, no Sudão do Sul, entre outros conflitos, bem como a estabilização da Líbia. Estes esforços foram sempre desenvolvidos em estreita colaboração com os Estados-membros, a Comissão da União Africana e as comunidades econômicas regionais e mecanismos regionais, bem como os parceiros internacionais e bilaterais, numa lógica de complementaridade e solidariedade e responsabilidade partilhada. Gostaria de juntar aos meus agradecimentos ao nosso irmão Gatete e saudar a cumplicidade que sempre existiu entre a Comissão Econômica das Nações Unidas para a África e a Comissão da União Africana. Excelência, durante os 2 dias de trabalho desta 48ª sessão ordinária do Conselho Executivo, debruçará sobre um conjunto de pontos centrais. Analisará, em primeiro lugar, os relatórios da 51ª Sessão Ordinária do Comitê de Representantes Permanentes, bem como a participação da União Africana no G20, refletirá sobre o posicionamento estratégico do nosso continente nas instâncias de governação global. Procederá, igualmente, o nosso Conselho a importantes eleições, nomeações dos novos membros dos órgãos da União, assegurando que estes sejam dotados de lideranças competentes e representativas. Serão analisados os progressos na implementação das decisões relativas ao processo SACA, a apreciação dos instrumentos jurídicos e os relatórios dos comitês ministeriais especializados, com destaque para os relativos às contribuições financeiras, às candidaturas africanas no sistema internacional e o acompanhamento da Agenda 2063. Excelências, sobre as contribuições financeiras, reiteramos a importância de todos os Estados-membros apoiarem de forma inequívoca a União Africana, através da implementação da decisão da Conferência AU de dezembro, decisão, aliás, 938, da 38ª sessão da nossa União, de fevereiro de 2025, que mandatou a Comissão a formular uma nova escala de avaliação para apreciação e adoção pela Conferência de Chefes de Estado e de Governo em fevereiro de 2026, em conformidade com o devido processo. Excelências, a escala de avaliação atualmente em vigor encontra-se totalmente desatualizada, sendo, por isso, necessária a adoção de uma nova escala assente nos princípios da solidariedade, equidade e capacidade de pagamento. As opções propostas pelos técnicos do F15, em particular a opção 3 e 4, permitem uma distribuição mais equilibrada das contribuições, reforçam a resiliência financeira e apoiam o alcance das metas de Joanesburgo de autofinanciamento da nossa organização. Importa enfatizar que a decisão da República de Angola em permanecer no nível Tier 1 para o ciclo de 2027-2029 facilita o consenso, tornando assim necessária a harmonização das opções apresentadas. Excelências, reafirmamos assim o nosso firme compromisso com o fortalecimento institucional da organização, com uma União Africana mais sustentável, solidária e capaz de responder às prioridades do continente num espírito de responsabilidade partilhada e cooperação entre os Estados-membros. Por fim, prepararemos a agenda e as decisões da 39ª sessão ordinária da Conferência do Chefe de Estado e de Governo, que exigem a sua prévia apreciação e adoção pela sessão do Conselho Executivo. Excelências, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, é neste contexto que apelo o engajamento ativo, a colaboração construtiva e ao sentido de responsabilidade de todos os Estados-membros para que possamos assegurar um bom desempenho dos nossos trabalhos e o cumprimento das tarefas que nos estão confiadas. Apelo, igualmente, à flexibilidade, ao diálogo e à compreensão mútua, particularmente na abordagem dos dossiês mais sensíveis, cujas decisões terão impactos duradouros sobre o futuro do nosso continente. Que nos inspire em todos os momentos o espírito de panafricanismo e os princípios fundadores da União Africana, para que possamos adotar decisões frutíferas, concretas, realistas e à altura das aspirações das gerações presentes e futuras. O mundo não vai esperar por nós. Perante a rapidez da transformação que este mundo conhece hoje, apenas tendo em mente esses valores que poderemos defender cabalmente os nossos interesses coletivos. Com estas palavras, declaro oficialmente aberta a 48ª sessão ordinária do Conselho Executivo da União Africana. Muito obrigado pela atenção.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi maintenant de passer à la photo de famille et pour cette fin, je demande aux autres délégués de bien vouloir rester à leur place respective pour assurer la bonne organisation de la photo. J'invite respectueusement à se diriger vers le lieu de la photo les honorables chefs des délégations des États membres, Son Excellence le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Son Excellence la Vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Son Excellence le Secrétaire général adjoint et Secrétaire exécutif de la Commission économique des Nations unies pour l'Afrique, les honorables commissaires de l'Union africaine, Son Excellence le chef de cabinet du Président de la Commission, les honorables chefs des organes et des agences spécialisées de l'Union africaine, les honorables chefs des communautés économiques régionales, Son Excellence le Président de la Banque africaine de développement, Son Excellence le Président de l'Afreximbank, Madame la Secrétaire de la Commission et Madame la Conseillère juridique. Par la suite, Son Excellence le Président du Conseil exécutif de l'Union africaine guidera le reste de la session. Sur ce, je vous remercie tous et toutes pour votre temps et je vous souhaite de fructueuses délibérations. Merci.
To that particular challenge. So we are also looking at a world that is now mainly being organized or reorganized around the control of key resources, not just minerals, but also water as a key resource. So I mention this because the discussion now is around the management of water, sustainable water availability and sanitation as our new AU theme for 2026. So it's quite an important theme that we are engaging with and discussing broadly as a commission, broadly as an African Union. And again, it re-emphasizes the fact that there's increasing focus and conversations around the control of key resources. And now what does that mean for the continent? And where do we position ourselves vis-a-vis water in particular? So because of the time, I think it's important that I frame my intervention, my opening remarks really around what that means for us vis-a-vis infrastructure, energy, and the digital economy, as it were. But the point to be made is that for us, water and sanitation really are not just about social services, it's economic infrastructure. We need water to run the factories that we need for industrialization. We need water for sanitation and to keep our people healthy, the workforce that we require. But we're also mindful that right now, as we speak, 300 million people on the continent don't have access to safe drinking water. And roughly 780 million, they don't have adequate sanitation. So that has economic implications. So we are mindful then that that also affects investment decisions, because when you're going to set up a facility manufacturing or even your offices for services, you do want access to water, you do want to make sure that your workforce is kept healthy. So from where we are sitting, really water sits alongside transport, energy and digital connectivity as a strategic input to our industrialization agenda, and we need to make sure then that we supply the necessary infrastructure that gives us safe and reliable water supply. So the calculation now that we are sitting with is that we need $30 billion on the continent to close our water investment gap. So certainly for us as the Department of Infrastructure and Energy, we need to then mobilize for that investment in particular. So the overarching program for us still remains the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA. And under PIDA, we have now PIDA PEP 2, the second version or second iteration of PIDA. We now have 69 priority cross-border projects spanning energy, transport, ICT, and water, and that will remain, PIDA will remain our priority and our anchor for what we are doing. And in the energy sector, we are looking at really ramping up our single African electricity market. And in the aviation sector, we are looking at really advancing our single aviation market, our SATAM. So I'm pleased that the key anchors in those areas, we've got AFCAC in the room, the Secretary General. They are here, the ones that are driving the aviation integration in particular. And we've got our energy colleagues in the room, AFREC, which is the African Renewable Energy Commission. They're also here, including our energy unit based in Addis. So we'll continue to ensure that we focus on those particular priorities. But even more so in accelerating implementation is around how do we make sure that there's greater ownership by AU member states vis-a-vis the priorities that we have, whether it's energy, transport, aviation, etc. So how do we then work much more strongly or intensely with our member states so that national development plans directly reflects the priority projects that we have and that have been identified by the member states and by the regional economic communities, and that they do not change cyclically when elections happen in countries, for example, in member states. So those sorts of issues are very, very pertinent, particularly when you talk about infrastructure, which is more long-term from a planning standpoint. Another priority, of course, is then the funding. Where's the money going to come from? And that's the million-dollar question that keeps on being raised both on the continent and globally. So the domestic resource mobilization agenda is quite critical, not just for the year 2026, but really and beyond. And how do we begin to tap into domestic finances that we now know for a fact about 4.6 trillion US dollars that is on the continent, that has been based on research, has been confirmed, but it's just not deployed in the real economy, right? It's sitting in rather low risk, opportunities, as it were, on the continent. So how do we then begin to tap into that resource, which is African resources, to develop and to close our infrastructure gap? That's a big area of work. And it's not just ourselves as the Commission that is concerned with it, but our agencies as well are looking at tapping into African domestic resources in a geopolitical world where capital is expensive and ODA has declined. And certainly the area of regulatory frameworks remains important. We keep an eye on our frameworks and policies, but what we can say is that a lot of great work has gone on prior to where we are now to make sure that the policies and the right policies are in place. So I don't think we need to be reinventing policy delivery over and over, but it's really around monitoring that policy is still fit for purpose. But we are now at the point of accelerated implementation. We do need to close the infrastructure deficit on the continent, and we do need to mobilize resources. So I thought with those opening words, we can then leave the rest of the time for the Q&A because our time is very limited. I'm told that you've got another one at 5:30, but I'm happy to hand back over to you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. Now it is open for media, and Her Excellency will not take too many questions, so let us stick 4 questions. Yeah, please. Introduce yourself and institution, please.
Bonjour Madame la Commissaire, c'est Mohamed Ali, journaliste.
Don't worry, next year I'll speak French. I'll understand. Yes.
Ok. Bonsoir tout le monde, c'est Mohamed Ouali, journaliste à L24 News, télévision algérienne internationale. Donc madame, si vous permettez, quelles mesures l'Union africaine prévoit-elle pour renforcer ou pour faire face au stress hydrique dans le continent africain, mais aussi quelles mesures l'Union africaine compte prendre quand même pour renforcer les infrastructures? Et si vous me permettez de citer l'exemple de l'Algérie qui a construit quand même 6 usines de dessalement d'eau de mer, est-ce que l'Union africaine peut prendre en considération peut-être le modèle algérien? Merci.
Okay, do you have other questions?
Hello. I'm Edith Mutedia from China Daily, and my question will focus on China because it's one of the main partners when it comes to infrastructure and energy cooperation with Africa. So what is your take on the current partnership between China and Africa on energy and infrastructure? And how can African countries strategically position themselves to fully benefit from China's investment?